Sometimes I wish I could be students.
Okay, so I was in watching your B block
Mm-hmm.
and we had the pre-conference. Okay, so now I just want to ask you some questions about your lesson.
Okay.
And just tell me, how did you feel the lesson went?
I felt it went pretty well. Between A and B, the B block was a better lesson than when I taught it during A block, which makes sense because I had time to actually test out some things.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they stayed a little more on task than and more focused than the A block had, which again I think attributes to me just having taught the lesson one more time. I already knew what was going to be the struggles for the students. And for the most part, the questioning went really well. I know I was a little disorganized. I didn't realize my PowerPoint did not match up to the order of the questions, so I had to provide a little bit more support by telling, okay, I think we're on question 1. Oh, nope, sorry, we missed it. We're on question 6 now.
Mm-hmm.
But the students reacted well and were able to still take notes over that. And otherwise, I feel like they understood what I wanted based on their bell ringer the next day. Since we ran out of time to do an exit slip, I chose to do it as a bell ringer the next day, and their answers were all very similar, and they provided me evidence from the lesson, which is what I was hoping to see.
So what was their bell ringer?
Do you think the overall policy of Native American removal was fair? Why or why not? And every single student said no, it was not fair.
Okay.
And then I got all kinds of different reactions. Some of them were the very generic of they were forced to move. Okay. I know this student gave me a little bit more detail. And I had actually kind of altered it when I was asking them on Wednesday. You could go from anyone's perspective.
Oh, I like that.
So you can go from the Native Americans' perspective, the white settlers, or the government's. Most of them chose the white settlers the Native Americans, because that's how the lesson was kind of taught, was through their perspective. But like this student started out with it talking about being forced from their own land, but it did kind of help out the settlers. He just felt that they should have been provided more land since they were shorted so much when they moved. So he kind of took it and put it from two perspectives, which is really cool. It's not something I anticipated happening.
Right.
But then I did, of course, get some of the very generic, no, they were there first, they deserve the land, which is, an argument we still see today with Native American removal.
Right. So you had said in B block you changed it a little bit. How did you change it from A block?
I was just able to provide more support. So like I knew where the questions exactly lined up in the PowerPoint, because I think I started out when I handed out when we started doing the lesson, I was teaching that portion. Sorry.
You're fine.
I was able to tell them right away, hey, these aren't in order, so don't freak out, because especially in that group, I have a lot of students who are lower learning levels, and so when things are out of order, it really throws them off and confuses them. So I was able to know right away, okay, hey, I actually had to provide more information, because I think one of the questions, it wasn't even on the slide, so we had to actually talk about how that was applied versus actually finding the information on the slide.
Okay, so what were your learning targets?
I wanted them to know what the Indian Removal Act was, what did it do, and how does it affect even today, how does it link to other events? Because I'm trying to instill the idea that history is an ongoing story. It's not just this, and this. It's a story, and it's constantly interacting with previous events that we've learned, and it's going to influence the future. And so I think they, for the most part, were getting onto that and understanding, because most of their answers were from the perspective of today. Hindsight's 2020. We can look at it and go, that's not fair. But at the time, the settlers might not have seen it that way. They were seeing it as, well, this is our land, we deserve the land. And so I think they, for the most part, hit the targets. I would have liked to have done a little bit more reviewing of previous lessons and tying that in, because I hit on a few things and I was looking at their faces, and a couple of them were pretty blank. I know when I mentioned the Bill of Rights and stuff, some of them were trying to think back 4 weeks.
Sure.
So
and I liked how you you had good transitions. One thing, looking at it, you had, and I see you didn't get to the exit slip, but then you showed
Yeah.
that you did that
Yeah,
the
I did the next
as
day,
an
and that's
entrance.
oftentimes what happens is if we run out of time, rather than trying to cram it in or making them do it on their own, where I usually only get half the kids to respond, especially with this being a low tech day where they weren't able to use their computers. I just used it as the next day so that they can answer it. And it's nice because it gives them a chance to think about it overnight too, because some of the kids actually think about the material.
So anything else you would have done differently?
I think it was just adding in the previous lesson was the big thing. And then it would have been nice to have the exit slip at the end, but obviously time constraints.
Sure. So some things that I looked at. So, and also you wanted me to look at different classroom management strategies. What do you think worked for you during your classroom management?
It worked well to have them partnered, and doing it randomly makes a lot less headache when it comes to, I don't like my partner. Well, you don't get the choice. And I don't end up with the two people that sit there and talk the whole time because they're best buddies. And it somehow still always works out when I do the popsicle sticks. I end up getting usually a higher and a lower working together, so they're able to help guide each other, so I'm not having to spend the whole time with one specific group. I was able to circulate quite a bit and check in with the students, see where they were at. They were mostly on top of it. That was another thing I was able to fix from A Block, because one of the maps didn't have the answer, even though it said it should be on that map. So I was able to tell them that one.
Sure, to give them that clue that it wasn't.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize that it was on the second map, and that would have been a great way for like my tag students or my advanced students to have to think outside the box to find the answer, and I could have just provided the answer or guidance for the lower students that need the support. But hindsight's 2020.
How do you think what could you have maybe done to increase student engagement, or did you feel that it was great? I mean, how do you think?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay. I felt like it was pretty engaged. They weren't off task as much as they have been in other times we've done lessons. The nice thing with this one is it was a very packed day, so that helped us to stay very much on track of things, which was nice. Sometimes we have some downtime and it fizzles. I think it worked pretty well. I can't really think of anything I could have changed.
Sure.
Honestly, because it ended up being where they were paired up. My aide was able to work with the kids that needed that support.
Sure.
But yeah, I guess my management was actually pretty good. I always think I do worse than I actually do. I'm not very generous to myself, apparently.
So after this, one thing you talked about maybe reviewing the context of the lesson before. So what are your plans after this? After this lesson, where do you see, what goals, do you have any goals for yourself or for your teaching or
so
for
like
the
when
students?
I get to teach this again?
Or no, moving forward through your unit.
Okay, moving forward, actually we have already gone, because we're a couple days out, we actually were able to go back over those notes, and we actually put them into a chapter organizer that we had, where it was focusing on each lesson. They identify the problems that happen and how they fix them. And so using the notes, it actually was great because the kids could identify, this is a problem, this is a solution. We had a couple arguments over whether it truly was a solution or not, which was fun. And then we discovered that there were some things they never did resolve. Or I got to talk about how the reparations, well, that we don't cover in this class because we stop before we get to reparations. And so I was able to provide them future knowledge that will help them when they go to high school, which is always nice. Even if they don't remember it now, it might come back
just a little bit later.
Just a little bit later.
Yeah. So that's great. I really like that example because they're having to problem solve through what the solutions
And I use
were.
the popsicle sticks where I make them, okay, you tell me a problem, and then I pull another one. Okay, so what was the solution to this? So it was making each kid have to be responsible for having the notes down, and the few kids that apparently hadn't finished their notes, they struggled a little bit, so which was good.
Okay, so what I want to do too is kind of connect it to this rubric. So you really wanted me to look at content knowledge, strategies, and classroom management. So when I looked at this, as far as your content knowledge, I thought your content knowledge was definitely at expectations, maybe even close to significantly above expectations. So, you know, we really want to make sure we meet that middle column, and if we get above that, then I thought it was great. I feel like you were very versed in your understanding of the topic, and the kids
Mhm.
knew that you knew what you were teaching. And I think that's really important. So definitely that was a strong point. But I will have to say that my favorite part of your lesson was your classroom management, because the kids walked into the door, and well, I look at your classroom and it's amazing. It's so
Thank you.
organized, and it's
Thank you.
it's nice looking. And I'm it makes me think, boy, my classroom was such a mess. This like looks so nice. So I really
Thank you.
I love your classroom.
Thank you.
I think it's very inviting. The kids came right in. They knew where to get the work. Your procedures are awesome. Like they knew exactly what to do when they came in the door. And I know like the associate remember, because she was sitting here, and then a couple kids, they almost walked by, but then they saw the other kids grabbing
Mhm.
the paper. So right away the kids knew your routines. And what I thought was awesome about that is you didn't lose transition time. And that's incredible in an 80-minute class.
Yeah, that's something that was why they actually have that procedure that was new for this year. So
Mhm.
it was actually kind of a thing for them to have to learn, because I had them last year, 7th graders, and we had totally different routines.
Mhm.
And I told them, okay, guys, forget everything we did last year,
Mhm.
totally new routines. And the kids are starting to really respond to it, because they'll actually call each other out now. They're like, hey, did you get the paper? Oh, hey, you're missing one. And so it's nice, because I don't have to spend the time doing that.
Or pass out the paper.
Yes.
Which, just those little things that you don't often think about. So the kids
No.
got in here, they got their workout. One girl had trouble with her Chromebook, and I said, why don't you just use the loaner? And she did.
Yeah, they've been good about that.
So I feel like I liked also your culture with the kids. I felt
Mhm.
like you tried to make personal connections throughout the lesson. I thought it was very obvious that you really enjoy what you're doing,
Mhm.
and you really like the kids. So I thought,
Yes.
and the kids seemed to have a great rapport with you. So
Mhm.
I think that was very evident. So I
That's
really
good.
thought and I love the popsicle sticks. You called
Mhm.
on almost all the kids. All the kids did get called on at least once.
Mhm.
Many of them twice. And then the other aspect was the different strategies you used. One thing that I really liked with your strategies is that you're teaching them how to take notes in a different way.
Mhm.
I thought that was great with answering the questions. You didn't just read your PowerPoint.
No, I hate doing that.
And then you had a few, and it was simple. It was 8th grade level, because sometimes I worry about lecturing at the junior high level. But you had engaging photos. Now some of those are primary sources.
Mhm.
You could even have dug deeper into some of those photos.
Sorry, that was actually another thing I forgot to write in my write-up,
Mhm.
was that I would love to dig deeper into the primary sources. I think I've told you I completely
Mhm.
scrapped what I did last year, and so
Mhm.
this year it's much more structured, and so my goal for next year is actually to be increasing the amount of primary sources and working those more into the lessons versus focusing so much on the textbook,
Mhm.
which is still a major improvement from what I did last year.
Right.
So, but I appreciate, the primary
yeah.
sources and trying to point out, hey, this is what they look like. And
Yeah.
A block, we actually had a really short conversation about why we had a picture of Chief John Ross, but they were paintings of Andrew Jackson. And we got to discuss a little bit about how photography hadn't come out yet, but Chief John Ross happened to be alive when photography was a thing.
Mhm.
And so we talked a
Awesome.
little bit about the biases of, did he actually look like that?
Uh-huh.
Because the kids are like, there's no way he actually looked like that. I'm like, well, that was the joy of the
Right,
time. They
right.
could tweak things a little if they wanted.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So I thought that definitely you are starting to incorporate that. I do really see like your sense of wanting to grow and continue
Mhm.
to get better. I also liked you had commented how you do a map and a timeline, just your route at the beginning of every unit. So
Mhm.
the kids have all those expectations. They knew when they were done what to do with their vocabulary. I mean, if you get done, you had something for them to work on. So there wasn't any dead time in your instruction. So the strategies with the note taking, and then with them doing their worksheet. One thing that I thought and the map skills within the worksheet, I thought was great. I thought you had them made sure they read the directions. So, when and it's funny because I taught the same lesson. I remember all those, like several years, the kids couldn't figure it out. We'd always do one together all the way across. But I thought, was I hindering them? It made me really think about it because you were like, read the directions. And you know what? The kids did way better on that than I remember when I taught it. That
has been a learning curve. We've done some assignments where if they don't read the directions, they won't do well. And so it's kind of gotten, especially my students who are upper level, where they think, oh, I don't need to read that because I just know what they want. It makes them actually have to be responsible for understanding and following directions, because that is as much a part of learning as the content. Because if you don't know how to use the content, it's not going to do you any good, and it saves me a ton of time of having to constantly answer the same question 50 times. I can just say, did you read the directions? Look at 2C, because that was one they struggled with. They kept forgetting that there was a neutral option. I'm like, that's fine. That's why you have the instructions on the backside. You can always go back and forth.
Sure.
So,
And I thought the kids were working well together. There was a mutual respect all around. Like you said, I thought your classroom management is superb. I thought, your, it was an enjoyable lesson. I liked it. I liked seeing the kids. They were engaged. So I think you did a great job.
That makes me feel good. I was a little nervous having known you taught that lesson so many times. I was like, okay, this is not going to be so good. I actually feel good about that. Thank you.
And you did it differently, but that's great. Like,
okay.
I loved how
I
you did
tell the kids, I'm like,
Yeah.
I never do things the same way, because I've had kids say, well, that's not how she taught it before.
I
I'm like,
know.
well, I wasn't here when she taught it, so I don't know what it looked like. I
Right.
can't teach it the same way. I
Right.
teach the way I know.
Right, and I thought it was great. I
That's
really
good. I'm
liked
glad
that
you
you
hear
had them
that.
do their
It's nice to
adventure.
hear that there is...
Right, that
But-
there's not one way to do it.
Yeah.
There's several ways. I mean, they could have worked on their own. They could have done that a variety of ways, and I liked how
and
you
we
did
do that with different lessons. There's times where their worksheet is completely them.
it.
We didn't actually go over the worksheet. I had them turn it in this time. There have been times where we will go through the answers. And so a lot of times those are the ones where I'm not as focused on them having the right answer as just the process of going through it. So some of the early worksheets, I tell them this should be a really easy 10 points at the end of the day, because we go through the answers and they can change the answers.
Sure, you want them to understand.
I want them to understand it and have the correct answers, so when they go to fill out their study guide and study for their test, I know they have the right answers, rather than worrying about, well, did they get the right... I'm not as worried about that. I'm looking at the long term, can they actually learn the material for the test, versus they happen to get it wrong that day, it's because they misread a word. So
Awesome.
it's
Well,
been a learning process, but it's getting there.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was a really great lesson. So good job.
Thank you.